Patty, could you talk into yours? Or just go ahead and talk? I have a little gauge here that says things.
Well, what I started to say about Ned, I didn't think that that book would have a very great appeal to the public. But of course, I was tremendously interested in it because I not only knew Ned so well and had known him for years and years and years, but I knew Matt Shergy so well. And that's what made me so interested in the book, was all about the Shergy Ranch, the Guayola.
I have just started. So I don't know particularly.
Well, I called up to buy the book for a friend of mine, and they said they were all out. So evidently, I was glad to hear that they'd had a good sale around Sheridan. But I can see they might around Sheridan because an awful lot of people knew Ned. He came out from New York City with a man with the name of Tommy Ryan. And Tommy Ryan, you know, was a bad boy. Finally drank himself to death. But Ned was not. Ned was always a very nice sort of a person. And then after he was married, he came here with his wife and his son as dudes.
Well, right here to Eaton's?
Yes.
Well, for heaven's sake, I didn't know that, Patty.
So,
My gad, I didn't know that at all.
Yes. So I've known Ned a long time, and I have all the books he's written and all autographed copies. He always sends me one, autographs them.
Well, I was thrilled, and you know, I haven't done a review for a long time.
And poor Ned, I feel very sorry for him. His wife is terribly crippled with arthritis, and they were people that all. And Ned said he never had a lot of money, but he had enough money so that they always had a nice house, a nice place to live. Well, now they live in Denver. They can't get any help. His wife is practically helpless. They live in an apartment, and Ned takes care of her and tries to make a living writing.
Well, so he's not any longer in the cattle business then, is
No,
he?
oh no.
So
no.
That's all through now.
Oh, that's all. See,
He writes beautifully, Patty.
I think he does too.
I think so.
Matt Shergy, you know, had one of the biggest outfits in this country.
Well, that's what
and
they tell
he
me.
died. And of course, after he died, well, then Ned was out of it. But Ned bought in, not a great deal, didn't have a great deal of money, but he bought in with Matt Shergy, and they had many trips together buying cattle. And I think that he writes very well. And of course, because I've known Matt, I knew Matt always, and his wife, and the ranch, and everything.
For heaven's sake, well,
The ranch is out from Wyola,
all right.
the
I
Etler
don't.
Ranch.
And
But of
that,
course, it's changed hands since Nat died. I think some rich people now from Texas own it.
what was the name of that ranch? It was the
Antlers.
Antlers. That's right. Well, I've just started it, Patty. I'm fascinated, and I've got to get with it pretty fast because I have to get it reviewed pretty fast. So
Yes.
I have to do it. But I'll tell you what I would like to talk about is exactly that kind of thing. I'd like to talk about the people who came here all these years, and whoever strikes you as fascinating, and whoever you might think of that would be fun for us to talk about.
I don't know if we've had very many celebrities. We've probably had a few. Of course, you know, Mary Roberts Reinhardt came here for years and years. Now I understand that lots of people don't even know who Mary Roberts Reinhardt
That's true.
is or was, because she's dead now. Well,
Yes.
she was a perfectly delightful and charming and beautiful woman, and just as down to earth as could be. And her husband had been a well-known heart specialist in Pittsburgh.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
Mary, you see, was a trained nurse, and that's how she met him.
Oh,
And
I
he
didn't
was
know
a well-known heart specialist in Pittsburgh. But as he said, after Mary became so famous, he was known just as Mary Roberts Reinhardt's husband. But he was an awfully nice man. And then, of course, we've had 5 generations of Reinhardts here.
Is that right?
We had Mary Roberts brought her mother out, and then, of course, her 2 sons grew up here, and then all their children, and 2 years ago, this last fall, 2 of her grandchildren came, and one of the grandchildren lives in Spain, and the other one lives in New York.
Oh, for
Well,
heaven's
now
sake.
the family are all gone, but they're Alan Reinhardt, the second son, the oldest son, Stanley, is dead. The second son lives in New Orleans.
And that's where those children were brought up, was out here.
Well, they really grew up on this ranch.
Oh, well, for well, now
And
there's
we have, across from our swimming pool, we have what we call Stanley Camp. And we have a barbecue place and benches and tables over there. And in the summer, every 2 weeks we have a barbecue over there so that some of these older people that never can ride far enough to go on a trip in the mountains can have an outdoor picnic. We do that all summer long, every 2 weeks. And young
Marvelous.
Stanley Reinhardt cleaned that place out. It was just along the creek and lots of brush and everything.
Yes.
And he cleaned that out, so we call it Stanley Camp. And it's named for Stanley Reinhardt.
I'll be darned. That's terrific. And so all of these places, do they take on, do you name spots for people over a period of time? And
Well, what we have done, we as people came year after year, they would, well, we still call the Reinhardt cabin the Reinhardt cabin. Now, they never owned that cabin. Mary, in some of her books, pretended she owned it, you know. They say writers can take all sorts of liberties, and we didn't care, but she never owned it. It was just a ranch cabin, but she lived in it, you see.
yes.
And she's the only person, I think maybe one other person that is ever here, that had a personal maid. And we built a little room onto this cabin for Mary, for the maid, and there was a lovely great pine tree there. So the cabin, the room is built around the pine tree. And the pine tree, so that it was a maid's room. And now, of course, we use the cabin for other people.
Yes.
It's a big cabin, takes about 7 people.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Has a living room and 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. And, all our better cabins are over along the creek.
I see.
And,
Right back
yes,
in here.
Yes, right over here. You've never been out here enough
Never
to know.
have, Patty.
Well,
don't
I tell you, after I'll take you out. I can't walk around with you very well, but I'll take you out through the living room and onto the terrace, and you can look and sort of see how the land lies.
I'd love to
And
do
Wolf
that.
Creek comes down the canyon and runs back of all these cabins, and they're taken year after year with the same families. And if they miss a year, those people, they lose their priority, and then somebody else gets it. But the ones that come year after year have the same cabin.
The same cabins. I think people don't understand how marvelous that continuity is in the dude ranches. Now, you reminded me of something.
We've
Pat.
had people, we have people that have been here. We had one lady, she died a year ago, Christmas. She was here 52 years, never missed a summer.
Never missed a summer for 52 years.
52 years.
And they consider this a part of home, don't they?
Oh,
this
yes,
is a
they
part
love
of
it.
Yes.
And, well, we have a lady here right now. This is their 33rd summer. She lives in Palm Springs in the winter and here in the summer. She's a widow, has husband's dead. She has no family. She has a stepdaughter that lives in Carefree, Arizona, outside
Yes.
of Tucson. Yes. Is it Tucson or Phoenix? Outside of Phoenix.
Outside, I know about where it is.
Yes,
It's the,
yes. Well, I've
it's,
been there, but it's
Mamie
been so long
Eisenhower
ago. I
went
think
there
it's
years
outside
ago.
of Phoenix.
Yes.
Mhm.
You reminded me of something, Patty, or at least somebody last night did, and I'm glad I've thought about that right now. But I was talking with Marjorie Owens. Marjorie,
Oh, yes.
and
She's a lovely
isn't
person,
she?
yes.
I love
Yes,
that lady.
yes.
And we were talking, and she said, "You know that Patty is an Alderson." And of course, I used to, when I was a kid growing up in Cody, I can remember my dad reading the about the bones, little
yes,
bones
the
and big
Bones
bones,
brothers.
all over
Well,
there.
you see, my father was one of, I think he had 4 brothers and 1 sister. Well, my father ran away from home. He was the son of a Baptist minister, and Mama said that Ms. Alderson was very narrow-minded. The children had to go to prayer meeting every so often in church. On Sunday they weren't allowed to play the piano, they weren't allowed to dance or anything, and I guess my father just got fed up with it, and he ran away and went to Texas and came up with the trail herd into Montana and settled on a homestead. See, the country wasn't even surveyed.
For heaven's
Right
sake,
where
Patty.
Lame Deer Agency, the Cheyenne Agency, is now. That was my mother's first home.
For
And then lots of people thought my mother came on a steamboat down the river,
Yes,
Yellowstone.
yes.
Well, she didn't. The Burlington Railroad came through from Chicago to Billings in 81. And my mother and father were married in 83, so she came on the train to Miles City. But they lived 100 miles from Miles City. And on the Indians all around them, though it hadn't been set aside as a reservation. And my mother one time never saw a white woman for a year,
For heaven's sake.
surrounded by Indians. And I was born on a little stream called Muddy.
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 Yes.
Muddy. I
Yes.
suppose the stream was muddy. That's probably where it got its name. I told one of the dudes one time, asked me where I was born, and I told him I was born on the Cheyenne Indian Reservation. They said, "Are you an Indian?" And I said, "No, I'm not an Indian, but I was born on the reservation."
I think that's marvelous. And I know that Lame Deer area. I know where that is. I know all of that.
Yes.
And that's where all that originally.
And Uncle Lou, the Bones brothers' father, came out to work for my father.
Oh, for
And
heaven's
he met his wife out here. And that's how they happened to live out here. And those boys, the Bones boys, are my first cousins. And they're the only relatives that I ever knew of my father's.
Is that
Because
right?
none of the others ever came west.
And they were exciting
And all
guys.
I knew
Gee.
about the boys, about my father's family, my mother told me.
I see. So that was the only access
But-
you had?
Yes.
Well, I've,
But of
love
course-
those boys.
And of course now there's only one left.
Yes, I understand
Yes.
that. I
And
understand
he's not
that.
well at
and
all.
he's not
you know.
well.
No.
That's what they tell
They
me.
have been living in Palm Springs, but they sold their house out there
Oh, well.
and got a good price, and they're now back at Bernie. But he has palsy.
Oh,
no,
does he really?
What do you call
Like
it? where you
Parkinson's?
Shake.
Parkinson's.
Parkinson's disease. That's what I'm trying to think
That's
of.
what Dad had.
Yes, I know it.
And
And it
he's-
was really through your father that he found out about the medicine that
Yes.
helped your father
yes.
so much.
L-Dopa.
That's right.
And it was a miracle
Yes,
for Dad.
yes.
And that
Yes.
helps relieve those symptoms in ways that others
Yes,
just don't
well,
do it.
And it was through your father, I remember now.
Well,
Well, now Big Bones died of a heart attack,
Yeah.
and his widow, Mary, lives in Sheridan, you know.
no,
and
no,
she's
I
a
didn't know that at
delightful
all.
person.
I didn't know that at
Yes.
all. I
Well,
remembered
she
that.
is his second wife. He and his first wife are divorced. His first wife lives up in Lewistown, Montana.
I
and
see.
he had 3 girls, and Little Bones, his brother, had 2 boys.
Well, for heaven's sake, so
Now
that's
Bones
how.
is dead, and Floyd, the older boy that was in the movies at one time, died up in Eventide.
Well, for heaven's
couple
sake.
years
Well, did
ago.
he have one boy in the movies there? I didn't
Yeah,
realize
Floyd,
that.
Floyd was in the movies in the days of the silence.
Well, I
Yes,
didn't know that.
yes,
I didn't know
He
that.
was in a good many movies
didn't
in the
know
early days, before
didn't-
talkies came in.
Before the talkies. That's exciting. I
Yes.
didn't realize that.
And now there's only Irv left, and he is not well at all.
Well, I've heard that he's not well.
And Nancy and Tommy were in Tucson this winter, and the Aldersons were over there with their son, and they saw him. And Tommy said he thought Bones had failed terribly, that it even had affected his speech, that he couldn't hardly understand him.
oh, well, Dad has had similar kinds of troubles, but he's still able to fight it off,
Well,
Patty.
good. Now,
And,
that's fine.
Yes,
Isn't
he
that
is.
wonderful?
Oh, yes, and
Yes.
I, of course, had loved and admired him when he was a young volcano, but, I admire him even more now.
Of course you do. Anybody that can
fighting,
overcome an illness like that.
Good
and
heavens,
keep,
yes.
And keep carrying on deserves all the credit in the world.
I agree. I couldn't agree
Absolutely.
more.
Yes.
Well, Patty, let me ask you some questions about how you met Bill, for instance.
Well, you see, after my father died, some friends of my mother's that lived at Burney, where the Aldersons lived,
Yes.
persuaded my mother to leave Miles City and come up to Burney and take the Burney post office and start a little store. And they would give her those big outfits like the 3-circle and the quarter circle, all big cattle outfits, would give Mama their business. And she had freight trains that went back and forth to Sheridan and hauled all the stuff out. So we lived there I came to Burney when I was 10,
Heaven.
and I think we left there when I was about 15.
Oh, for
and
heaven's
then,
sake.
by that time, see, my brother, unfortunately, was the youngest one of the family. So it was some time before he could do anything to help my mother make a living.
Oh, sure.
Well,
Okay, I
after
see.
they got to where they could buy a place of their own, they bought a place out on now it's all oil land, but a country called Youngs Creek, which adjoins the Crow Reservation.
Oh, for
And
heaven's
only
sake.
18 miles from Sheridan, due north of Sheridan. So
Oh,
I
for
lived
heaven.
there, and then I went to high school in Sheridan, you see.
Wow.
And the Eatons had moved here in 1904, so Bill was going to high school. And those days, Sheridan wasn't paved or anything, and lots of the kids had horses in town. And after school in the evening, they'd ride up and down and buzz Main Street on their horses like the kids do now in the car, And for some reason, I don't know how I happened to have a horse in town, because we were always poor, but I did have a horse in town, and I kept him at a livery stable run by the Powers brothers, and it was right across from the Western Hotel now,
yes.
and where that big building is, the Keenan building.
Yes, right.
Well,
right.
it was a livery stable, and I had a horse, so we used to ride after school, you see. And I met Bill because he had a horse, and several kids in town had horses, and we'd ride together, and that's how I met Bill.
That's terrific.
And I used to come out here to visit, but long before we were married, because we weren't married till I knew Bill when I was 15, and we weren't married till I was 23, and Bill was 24.
For heaven's sake.
So I knew him a long time before we were married.
Well, for heaven's
But I
sake.
used to come out here and visit.
And, well, my mother used to come out here and
Yes,
visit,
yes.
and absolutely loved it. Those were some of the high points of her stay in Sheridan.
Well, I think about the Coy family. When Bill's mother and father first came here, so of course, Mr. Coy, they lived at the mine.
Yes, that's
and
right.
they became very good friends.
This is what I
Yes,
understand.
The
My
Coys
mother's.
and the Eatons, you see.
Yes,
So
my.
they always knew each other.
Yes, I understand that.
Yes.
Peter was very fond of Bill,
Yes,
as I understand
yes,
it.
yes.
And that was always exciting. So whenever they would get together, then Mother would come out,
Yes.
and she said that they would talk and they would have their time, but the kids, the children, would
Right.
be around there having fun.
Well, that's true. They were always friends.
Yes, that's right. Tell me, Patty, about when we're talking about people, are there any, I remember from the other side of the mountain what they were doing when they first began to work through the Valley Ranch area over
Yes,
there.
yes.
Valley is much a latecomer compared to what
Well,
the
it
Eaton
is,
Ranch
but Valley
was.
is among the older ranches now.
It is among the older ranches,
Well, you
but-
see, the Eatons came out from Pittsburgh to Medora, North Dakota in 1879. So 2 years ago, we celebrated 100 years that the Eatons had been out here.
Of course
And they
you did.
lived in Medora, you see, and then that country was becoming settled up with Russians. The railroad was bringing in these Russians to settle up the country, and they decided it wasn't going to be a very desirable place to live. In the meantime, the winter of 86 and 7 had come along, and everybody that went into the cattle, including my father at that time, with cattle, came out with practically nothing. They died like flies, as you know.
Yes.
And that's all history. And so the Eatons decided that in the meantime, they had had so many friends come out from Pittsburgh and stay, young men, and never charged them a cent. And the Eatons always said that these friends sent their sons out there to get them away from liquor. And they said it was the worst place in the world because they only lived 3 miles from the town of Medora, and Medora, every other place was a saloon. So all these boys had to do was ride into Medora and get drunk. Well, then when the hard winter came, of course, they never charged anybody a cent. And when the hard winter came, Uncle Howard said to the boys that were there, he said, well, boys, we're broke, but if you want to stay on and help pay for the beans and the bacon, you're welcome to stay. And they charged them $25 a month.
Over. Patty, that is a great story.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. No, I didn't realize.
So that's sort of the beginning of the Dude Ranch business. And they came over here in 1904, so they've been here quite a while now.
Oh, wow, which
Yes.
is a tremendous, yeah, that's
We have these carpenters, they're non-union from over at Dayton, and they have just left. They've been over, they were here they come over every spring and patch up everything to keep the place, a lot of these buildings are getting pretty old, to keep the place from falling down. And I told them this time, I said, I'm afraid the time's going to come when you won't be able to patch us up any longer. This year they re-singled the Howard Hall up here, and there's always repair work to do. We had a big wind and a tree went through one of the cabin roofs, so we had to put a new roof on that. And there's always so much repair work
yes,
to
they're
do.
just
This
flat
place is so big. I always remember Mr. Fleming, who was the Eaton manager until he died, a man from Pittsburgh who'd come out here for his health. And he said it was too bad they ever let the ranch get bigger than 50 people. If you had 50 people, you could run it with a minimum amount of help.
Yes.
And your expenses would be, our overhead is so terrible. You see, we have, right now, we're getting quite a few dudes, and we'll have quite a lot for the 15th. But we have just oodles of help because we've got to get this place all cleaned up, you see.
Yes.
And your overhead is terrific.
I understand
You never
that,
can
Patty.
make any money. You take it in, people think, well, they charge so much. You take it in with one hand, pay it out the other.
And this day and age, I imagine it's worse than
terrible.
ever because you've got
Yes.
all of that inflation.
Well, and you know what food and everything costs
Yes,
nowadays.
yes.
So to feed the people and feed all the help you have to have and pay the wages. And another thing that's been bad, all these high prices that the miners pay, that the mines pay,
Yes.
and the oil fields, well, we can't compete with that. And
No.
so the help situation gets worse every year.
We have the same trouble at the college.
I'm
we
sure
can't
you would.
compete with the mines
I
in
know
terms
you
of
cannot
secretaries
compete with the mines.
and everybody else.
Do
you
you
can't
all
do
live
it.
at the college?
I live at the old. I live up on the hill, Patty, where Peter Coy
Oh, you
lived. The
did?
old house.
Oh, well, now that's nice.
Isn't that nice?
Yes,
We-
I didn't think you'd live at the college, but I didn't know where you did live.
Well, it was an awfully lucky break, and it was just by the most incredible circumstances that we ended up there.
Wasn't that
oh,
nice?
it's just wonderful. Now, you spoke about Fleming, who was the manager of this place.
Yes.
Now, when did he come to manage? And did most of these people come from Pittsburgh, Patty, who first
Mr.
came?
Fleming came from Pittsburgh and had a very fine position, whatever it was, I'm not sure. But he came to the Eatons in North Dakota for his health.
That's where they first.
Yes, and
All
that's
right.
how they knew him. And then when they came over here, none of the Eatons were really very good businessmen. Uncle Howard was a charmer. He was the one that went east every year and sold all these trips through Yellowstone and Glacier and had a wonderful personality. And Uncle Will was sort of the Beau Brummel of the family. He was sort of the gentleman, and the women all liked him. He'd been married. His wife lived less than 2 years. He never had any children, and he never remarried. Uncle Howard was an old bachelor, never married. And Alden, my father-in-law, was married and had one child who was my husband, you see.
Yes. All
The
right.
3 brothers.
Well, that's.
They
little-
had another brother, but Uncle Charlie Eaton, and he at one time did have a ranch in North Dakota, but not with the Eatons. But his wife didn't like it, so he sold out, and he lived the rest of his life in Geneva, New York.
Oh, for
But he
heaven's
used to
sake.
come out here in the summer and visit him.
Well, Patty, how did they find this particularly beautiful
Well,
place here?
That's sort of interesting, too. See, Uncle Howard had been taking trips through Yellowstone, and he was very interested after they sold the ranch to have something near the park. So Bill's father and Uncle Will and Uncle Howard went up to Livingston to look at the country around the park. Well, Uncle Howard loved that, but the Eatons weren't crazy about it, and they have a great deal of wind up there. So they came back to Billings not having found anything, and were on their way back to Medora. Those were the days when you rode the trains, you see.
Yes.
And when they got to Billings, someone said to them, "Have you been down around the Sheridan country?" Well, Sheridan was so new then, they hardly had even heard of it. So they said no. Well, they said, "There's some beautiful country down there." So they came down to Sheridan, and they got a real estate man. I remember when I was going to high school, passing his office many times. His name was Shorty Beckwith.
Shorty Beckwith.
Shorty Beckwith. And he brought him out here in a buggy, of course, the days before cars. At least, I'm sure there were cars, but they didn't have any in Sheridan, many. So they came out here by horse and buggy, and they thought the place had possibilities. But at that time, as you come up the road, on a flat down here are some corrals. Do you remember passing
Yes,
those?
I do. Yes, I do.
Well, they only owned, the ranch then only went to those corrals.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sake.
it was, I've forgotten how many acres, but very small compared to what it was then. So they brought these, they all came over and they thought had possibilities. So they went back and talked it over and with their friends and decided to buy it. And they came over here in 1904, and since then, you know, they bought on both sides of them. And then now the ranch this place has 7,000 acres in it.
Oh, for
And
heaven's
then the ranch, you see, you know about where we take our horses, don't you?
Well, and I'm not too sure of that at all, Pat.
Well, you know, they just came through Sheridan the other day, which is always quite an occasion.
Yes,
And,
I heard about that.
Because they take the pickup and fix it up as a mess wagon, and they take teepees, and they take the horses down in the fall, and then they go down in the spring and drive them up. It's a 3-day trip.
for
It's 100 miles. And that ranch down there, of course, it's not pretty country like this. It's halfway between Arvada and Gillette.
All right, well,
And
I
you know
sure
that
know that
country.
country.
Yes.
Oh, do I ever.
Well, they
Okay.
sort of sagebrush and badlands.
Yes.
Wonderful winter country for horses.
Oh, sure,
Lots of protection, you know, and
Absolutely.
good feed.
Absolutely.
And they have 21,000 acres down there.
Oh, for heaven's sake,
It's a
Patty.
big
So
place.
that's where they winter
Yes,
all the horses, and then
yes,
they bring them back through Sheridan, and they bring them up
And
here
they just
for the
came back.
season.
They just came up, I think, about 2 weeks ago, and we have 2 dude friends that come out every year from Chicago. They love to go down and bring those horses up. I tell them they're bears for punishment because it isn't a very easy trip.
No, it can't be
But-
very easy.
And the first, they had 2 good days this spring, and 1/2 day till they got to Sheridan, and from Sheridan on out that afternoon, it just rained cats and poodle dogs, and they were just soaking wet and cold and tired and everything. But they still, these 2 dudes, thought they'd had a wonderful time.
Isn't
They
that
just loved
fine?
it.
Sure, and they do. They just
Yeah,
do.
they just loved it. And
Oh,
they-
yes.
They come out every spring, and then this one man comes back with his wife for the month of September, and the other young man comes with his family for the month of August.
For the month of August, so they share.
And this one boy, this Bots Young, that comes out, he is a 4th generation. His grandmother and grandfather and great-grandmother and grandfather were dudes here in the early days.
Patty, that's the kind
He
of
is a
story
4th
that just
generation.
that's the thing. Now, who is that? Would you tell me who
The
that is?
Youngs.
The family. These are the Youngs.
The Youngs,
And are they from Pittsburgh?
no,
Do they,
no, they're from Chicago.
They're from Chicago.
Chicago.
So-
And I don't know how, really, I knew that the older ones long before Bill and I were married because they used to come over here to visit, and I knew them.
Well, for
and
heaven's
they
sake.
are 4th generation. His name is Botsford.
Botsford. That's an odd name.
It is an
Yes,
odd name.
yes.
Of course, everybody calls him Bots. Well, both his mother and father, and all of them are gone, but Bots has 3 children and a wife, and they come every August and stay all. He works for the glass, what's a big glass company?
Would it be Steuben?
Not Steuben, it's It's not that expensive, but it's a big glass company. He's worked for him ever since he got out of college.
Well, for heaven's sake, did Howard? Now I'm talking now about how Howard would go back and get people from Pittsburgh and other places. Did he have particular cities and particular places that he would go to attract people?
Of course, he went. I think he went to New York and Washington, all these cities. And Uncle Howard had a wonderful personality, and sort of like Charlie Russell, and was a wonderful storyteller. And one time he went
Boy,
east
we
and
would have
he
liked him, Patty.
he sold the Glacier Park trip. He oversold it. They had 100 people on one of those glacier trips, and it was all pack horse, you know. All pack horse, and you can imagine.
From here?
Well, no, we didn't. A man by the name of Brewster from Canada had the concession of the horses in Glacier for years, and you had to get your horses from him.
I see.
And they'd take the dudes from here, and of course the teepees and the bedding and all the equipment, and go to Glacier, and then outfit with the horses from there.
I see.
And I guess it was just a mess. Bill was along, and he said that some of these horses had never even been ridden or packed, and he said, of course, they'd put the packs on them, they'd buck all over the place. Bill said he went around, all the boys would go around picking up all these ladies' clothes that were on the trip. They had them in a little war sack on back of the saddle, you see. Of course, they were all bucks that Bill said they'd just pick them up, stick them in a sack, and had no idea whose they were, you know. So I guess it was just a mess. Oh, they were so mad at Uncle Howard.
Oh, were they really?
Imagine 100 people on a pack trip.
Oh, I can't even think of that. I can't even conceive of that.
I can't either. I think it would be terrible. Well, it was
But
terrible.
he survived. The
Well,
Eaton's Ranch survived
lived through
that.
it.
They lived through it. And then each year he would go back in the wintertime.
Yes, every winter he'd go back and drum up trade for the Yellowstone and Glacier.
Was that mostly the attraction? Pretty soon it came to be just people coming to live and stay in the summer.
Well,
but
and of course
mostly it was the attraction to go to Yellowstone.
Well, and of course a lot of them that went on the trip would come back and stay here after that.
After that was over.
But
So,
Uncle Howard was a great salesman, too much so. He was they tell a lot of funny stories on Uncle Howard. As I say, he didn't have much business ability. One time they had all these horses, and he went someplace, I think, back in Minnesota, and bought all these horses and had them shipped out, and they were already horse poor. They didn't need those horses at all. Another time he went to sale, and I guess they had a lot of shoes, and they bought all these shoes, and when they got them home, well, all the shoes were for the left foot. And that's the kind of thing Uncle Howard did. He just had no business ability at all.
but he sure could
But
sell.
he could sell anything. He was a charming and delightful person.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, and I know that has to be a part of the dude ranch business. You simply must have someone who has that sort of personality.
And Uncle Will, I'm always surprised that Uncle Will never married again, because the ladies liked him and he liked the ladies. And he was always very nice to them and rode with them, you know, and was just as nice to them as could be. And Bill's father was really the worker. He was the one that really did the work and was the practical one of the three brothers.
I see.
Yes.
So he did most of the business,
Yes,
and the
yes.
rest of that was then the other one was the one who didn't marry. Only one married then.
Yes, that's right, of the three brothers. The one that was married and his wife died was Willis.
That's Willis. Willis,
Mhm.
yes, all right.
Yes.
So, well, I recall seeing a picture, Patty. I'll never forget it. In fact, I think it's still around the house, of the three brothers out here by the big barn,
Yes.
on horseback,
Yes,
all
yes,
together.
yes.
I somewhere we have a copy of,
Yes,
of that
yes.
photograph, and I never. Patty, can you? This one of the things that fascinates me, and I'll lead into it by just asking you. There are so many people who come to a dude ranch, and there are so many fascinating stories that come out of those people. It almost feels like a question on a television show, but can you tell me some of the more colorful or fascinating experiences with people out here in the years past, if anything even strikes you funny or anything that.
Well, in the early days, everybody wore divided skirts. Women didn't wear pants.
Now I remember,
They
yes,
wore divided skirts
I
to
remember.
ride
I
in.
think my
Yes.
mother still has a
Yes.
pair of those.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure she had.
Oh, she
I'm
does.
sure she did have. Well, there was a Mrs. Snively, I think her name was, and she was the first person that ever wore pants among the dudes. And she had
About when was that,
pants
Patty?
and a little skirt that she put over them when she was walking around here. Well, she went fishing one day up the canyon, and when she tied her skirt on the back of her saddle, and when she came in to the corral, of course, she was just had her pants on. And oh, the Eaton brothers were shocked. Oh, they thought that was terrible. And Bill always told about one morning this woman came up to the corral, and he went to help her on her horse, and of course she had on a long divided skirt, and she couldn't seem to get her foot up in the stirrup. And so Bill sensed what was wrong, and he said, "Excuse me, lady, but I think you've got your legs through just one barrel of your skirt." And she had her legs then one side, and of course she couldn't get on. Things like that. But
Heaven's sake, that's just.
and then we've had some funny experiences with some Christian Scientists. We've had a few devout Christian Scientists. And one winter, in the winter, they used to take a few people all the year round. Well, they found out that didn't pay, so they haven't done that for years. But they did have a lady one winter, and she was living upstairs, and the wind was blowing, and it annoyed her very much. You know how the wind can blow.
Oh, boy.
So she wired from the office to her practitioner in New York or Boston, wherever it was, to please make the wind stop blowing. Well, of course, the wind kept blowing. So then she sent another telegram and said, "Wind still blowing. Please make the treatment stronger." Now that's faith for you,
That's
isn't it?
faith. That's a bundle of faith, let me tell you.
And another scientist that Bill told about. See, this was all before I lived here, and she had I guess she had earache or something. I'd have to stop and think a minute. Anyway, Ned Garrett was in the Western Union office in Sheridan at that time, and she was a girl I'd gone to high school with, and I knew very well. Well, this lady, for some reason, wanted me to send a message to this. So I went up to, and of course those days you could telegraph things, and she said she'd had an earache, I guess, or something, and had sent a wire to the practitioner, and it hadn't helped her any. So I called up and Edna, we always called her Ned. I said, "Ned, I have a message for you." So she said, "All right." And I said, "Please make treatment stronger. And ear still aching. Please make treatment stronger." And she said, "What did you say?" And I repeated it, and she just nearly died laughing. Those are the only two stories I remember of the Christian Scientists.
Yeah. Well, you know, Patty, you see so many people around the Sheridan area who are really descendants of Eaton's Ranch, who are people who came here.
We have an awful lot of people that have married and have met their their husbands out here.
Do you recall when I came here last fall, and through the door came Kelly Howie and his wife, and they had come here, I guess, to celebrate their 25th.
We met here. That was a match romance. Oh, we had many ranch romances.
Oh, yes, I forgot.
And of course, our theory we always sort of felt that it wasn't a very good thing for these Eastern girls to come out here and marry these cowboys, because of course the cowboys didn't have a dime. But you know, I can't think of one single case that didn't work out just fine.
Well,
they all got along beautifully.
Well, this is what,
Yes,
and they are all living here.
Yes.
And that's
yes,
the thing
yes,
that is
that's right.
amazing.
Yes.
I don't know what you call those people. Descendants of Eaton's Ranch is about all I can think of. But
Well, we've
they're,
had a lot of romances.
oh, it's just true. And I've even tried to think of some. I'm just unfamiliar with the number of them, except Kelly
And Elizabeth.
and Elizabeth.
Well,
Yes.
let's see. I have to stop and think too.
Well, I know that.
Well, Buck Blackburn in Sheridan,
Oh, for heaven's sake!
and his wife Ruby. He met Ruby here. He worked at the corral, and Ruby came from Nashville, Tennessee, and they were married, and very happily, and they were married about at least 20 years, and Ruby died, and now he's married again to a very nice person. He lives in Sheridan in the summer, and lives in Borrego Springs in the winter. Borrego Springs is right over the mountains from Palm Springs.
Oh,
It's
for
a little
heaven's
new sort of a settlement,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
a
But
new development.
well,
And this girl he married, Buck didn't have two nickels to rub together, but Ruby had a lot of money, and he lives the life of Riley. Has a lovely home in Sheridan up on Pioneer Road, and a home in Borrego Springs where they go in the winter.
well, for heaven's sake, Patty. And my understanding is that all of the Stevens family is in one way or another associated
and
with
of
the
course,
ranch.
Bob Stevens, who was the Secretary of War under Eisenhower, he and his family, he came here as a young man.
Oh, is
and
that
his two
right?
brothers came here, Nat and Jack. They grew up here, and then after Bob met his wife at a dance up here in Howard Hall, and now they came here, and all their children grew up here, and now he has a big ranch. He's retired from, they're the J.P. Stevens textile people.
Oh, for heaven's
Yes.
sake.
And
All right. I do know that.
Their winter home was in New Jersey, but they have a lovely ranch up in Montana now. They bought the old Heidi Cooper place.
Oh,
that was a
yes.
famous ranch.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, one
You've
of those.
probably heard of the Heidi Coopers.
I know Virginia Heidi Cooper very well.
Well, you see,
Yes.
Bob and Dorothy bought that ranch.
Oh, for
and they
heaven's
live out
sake.
here in the summer.
Oh, I did. Well, for heaven's sake,
They-
Patty. Well,
they-
that's a tie-in I've
Yes.
never
And
known.
they live on the old Heidi Cooper place.
Oh, well, that's exciting.
yes.
Now, you see, those tie-ins
Yes,
are very
yes,
interesting.
yes.
And Virginia, of course, is so interested in past history.
Yes, I know she is.
And have you ever seen her show of photographs and that sort of thing?
I have a few of her photographs.
Oh,
I
they're
think.
just
Yes,
magnificent,
yes.
Patty.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that's exciting to know
Yeah,
about, too.
yeah.
We were talking about people who were relatively famous there in terms of Stevens and the
Yes.
Secretary of Eisenhower Secretary.
Yes.
While we're at
First,
it,
Bob is a perfectly delightful and charming man, but they just crucified him in that job.
oh, it was a terrible job. What a thankless job, anyhow, for heaven's sake.
Of course, and they just crucified him in that job.
Wasn't that
But
unfortunate?
he is a wonderful man, and still is as chairman of the board of the J.P. Stevens Company. And he has, let's see, I have to count the children. They had one daughter, Joni, and she died a few years ago. But he has a son that lives out from Bozeman, who has a little ranch and is in the travel agency. And then he has young Bill and Whitney that are in the business in New York, in the textile business.
in the textile business.
Yes. Mhm.
Well, if you were going to think of so-called famous people or notable people who ever came to Eaton's Ranch, well, who would you think of?
Well, now, a lot of people think that Teddy Roosevelt came here. He never did. He was a friend of the Eatons and a neighbor of theirs in North Dakota.
Oh, now
But
you
he
see,
never was here as a dude.
oh, he never
No.
came here.
A lot of people think he did, but
Uh-huh.
he didn't. He never was here.
But
A
they
lot
knew
of
him
people,
over there.
Oh yes, in fact, when we go out in the room, I'll show you a picture of the autograph to Uncle Howard.
Oh, for
They were
heavens.
very good friends. And then, of course, when the Eatons lived in North Dakota, you know about who the Marcus de Maury was,
Oh,
don't you?
yes, yes, for
Well,
heaven's
he
sake,
was
yes.
neighbor of theirs
Was
too.
he really? Oh, yes, yeah. And well, out here, were there any notables that you recall that might strike your memory
We had a man here that one, but I can't think of his name. So from he was had some very fine job in Washington, but I've tried again and again to think of that man's name, and I just can't. I'm generally pretty good remembering names, but I've never been
You
able
sure
to
are,
think of his
Patty.
name.
Well, you sure.
So
Well,
I don't think we've had too many really prominent people.
it's been mostly a steady
Well,
group of people
I
who.
think we've had people that I would consider had a lot of money. Maybe they don't think so, but we've had a lot of wealthy people. But I don't think, and we've had some interesting people. Now, last year we had the commentator that's just
Brinkley?
oh, what'd you say?
David Brinkley?
Yes.
Oh, for heaven's
Yes,
sake, is
they
that
were
right?
here.
Well, I'll
In
be
his
sorry.
family.
Well, you see, now
And
that's
we've
exciting.
had a few, and we've had few prominent movie people, like Cary Grant
Oh, well, that's quite
And,
striking.
and Fred McMurray, who's a very nice person. He's been here with his wife and children several times.
Well, for heaven's sake.
And then we had, I'm not sure of her name now. She was here with her family twice. We've had some well-known movie people here, but I think that Fred McMurray was about the nicest. He's really a very nice family man. He was
Well-
here with his wife and 2 daughters, and they just couldn't have been nicer.
I understand from everybody who knows that man that
He's
he
a
was
very
a
nice